My name is Dylan Parker, 35 years old, and I built a tech empire that nobody in my family knew about. Growing up, I was always living in the shadow of my older brother Marcus, the golden boy who could do no wrong. While he basked in the spotlight, I quietly created a billion-dollar company behind the scenes, keeping my success hidden for years. I never planned to reveal my secret, especially not at his wedding. But sometimes life has its own way of exposing the truth when you least expect it. Before I tell you how my brother's wedding turned into the most satisfying day of my life, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had someone underestimate you and lived to see their face when they realized how wrong they were. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, always 3 steps behind my brother Marcus, who was 3 years older and a million miles ahead in our parents' eyes. From the moment he threw his first perfect spiral in Pee Wee football at age 7, Marcus became the golden child of our family. By high school, he was the star quarterback, homecoming king, and had the kind of natural charisma that made everyone want to be in his orbit. Meanwhile, I was the quieter one, the kid who took apart our family computer at 12 just to see if I could put it back together again. I was more comfortable with circuit boards than conversation, algorithms than athletics. It wasn't that I was antisocial. I just found people more complicated than programming languages. Our parents, Frank and Linda Parker, never explicitly favored Marcus, but their actions spoke volumes. The living room wall became a shrine to his athletic achievements, football trophies and medals, displayed in custom-built shelving with proper lighting. My academic certificates and science fair ribbons were neatly placed in a drawer in the office, something Mom would occasionally show visitors if they specifically asked about me. "Dylan is our smart one," she would say, as if intelligence was a consolation prize for not being exceptional. When I was 13, I won the state mathematics championship. It happened to be the same weekend as one of Marcus's regional football tournaments. My parents dropped me off at the competition with a hurried good luck before driving 3 hours to cheer on Marcus. My math teacher brought me home that evening, trophy in hand, to an empty house. When my parents returned late Sunday night, exhausted but elated from Marcus's victory, my achievement was acknowledged with a distracted, "That's great, sweetie," and a quick pat on the shoulder. Our family vacations were always scheduled around Marcus's training camps and tournaments. The annual summer trip to Lake Tahoe would shift weeks earlier or later, depending on his football schedule. If I mentioned my coding club or chess tournament, the response was always the same. "We need to work around your brother's commitments, Dylan. His coaches are counting on him." By the time I turned 16, I had built my first computer from salvaged parts I collected from neighbors and the local repair shop. I spent months perfecting it, coding simple games that I thought would impress my family. I remember proudly showing my father a simple racing game I had programmed from scratch. "That's nice, son," he said, glancing at the screen for maybe 3 seconds. "Did you see the article about your brother in the local paper? They're saying he might be recruited by Division I schools next year." High school only magnified our differences. While Marcus ruled the social hierarchy as quarterback dating cheerleaders and prom queens, I started a small computer repair business, fixing laptops and setting up networks for teachers and classmates. I made decent money for a teenager, but Marcus and his friends found it hilarious. "Here comes the Geek Squad," Marcus would announce whenever I showed up to fix one of his friends' computers. They would laugh, then grudgingly hand over their devices, desperate to retrieve their photos and messages. The ultimate irony was that Marcus relied on me to maintain his social status. His laptop needed constant attention after beer spills and downloading questionable files. I always fixed it without complaint, even as he boasted to his friends about keeping me in business. Our family dinners were predictable affairs. The conversation inevitably centered around Marcus's latest game, his college prospects, or which girl he was taking to which party. My parents would ask perfunctory questions about my day, but their eyes would drift back to Marcus as he launched into another animated story about a touchdown or a college scout who had approached him. When I graduated as valedictorian, I gave a speech about finding your own path to success. My parents congratulated me afterward, but by the next morning, they were back to discussing Marcus's scholarship offers. Years later, when I mentioned something from my speech, my mother looked blank before saying, "Oh, that's right. You did speak at graduation, didn't you?" College decisions cemented our family dynamic. Marcus received a full ride to Stanford on a football scholarship. A moment celebrated with a massive party, attended by what felt like our entire hometown. My acceptance to MIT with a partial academic scholarship prompted a family dinner at a local restaurant, where the conversation still managed to turn to how Marcus was preparing for his first season of college football. Stanford. Now that's a prestigious school, my father would tell anyone who would listen. When people asked about me, he would say, "Dylan's at MIT," followed quickly by, "But the real excitement is Marcus starting as a freshman at Stanford." To afford MIT, I worked 3 part-time jobs, serving coffee before classes, tutoring computer science in the afternoons, and developing websites for local businesses at night. During one holiday break, I overheard my parents discussing finances. "Is all that money for Dylan's school really worth it?" my father asked. "He could have gone to state college and learned the same computer stuff for half the price." My mother's reply was equally dismissive. "Well, he was set on MIT. At least Marcus's education isn't costing us anything." These moments accumulated over years, small paper cuts to my self-esteem that eventually left scars. I never confronted my parents or Marcus about how they made me feel. Instead, I channeled my frustration into late-night coding sessions and ambitious projects. I figured if words couldn't prove my worth, perhaps my actions eventually would. By the time I finished college, I had already mapped out my future in technology. What I never anticipated was how my family's perception of me would remain frozen in time, even as I evolved beyond the quiet kid in Marcus's shadow. They had cast me in a supporting role in the family narrative, and breaking out of that typecasting would prove harder than building a tech empire from scratch. I graduated from MIT in May 2008, right as the economy was collapsing into the worst recession since the Great Depression. Tech companies were laying people off by the thousands, not hiring fresh graduates with no experience. After 3 months of rejections, I finally landed an entry-level position at CloudStart, a small software company in Seattle that couldn't afford more experienced developers. My starting salary barely covered rent for my studio apartment, a tiny space above a Chinese restaurant that perpetually smelled like Kung Pao chicken. I lived on ramen, canned tuna, and the occasional splurge of actual fresh vegetables. Every paycheck was carefully divided, 80% to living expenses, 20% to savings, no matter how painful that made the rest of the month. At CloudStart, I was assigned to their legacy system maintenance team, essentially keeping outdated software alive through patches and minor updates. The work was mind-numbing, but it gave me insight into the vulnerabilities of cloud systems that most companies were ignoring. During night shifts and weekends, I developed a new security protocol that could protect data during transfer between cloud servers, a significant weakness in most systems at that time. When I presented my ideas to my supervisors, they patted me on the head like an eager puppy. "Nice initiative, kid," my manager said, "but we don't have resources for new projects. Stick to the maintenance schedule." After 18 months of being ignored, watching my innovations gather dust while continuing to fix the same security issues over and over, I made a decision that my parents called the biggest mistake of your life when I told them. I quit CloudStart to start my own company at 25, with just $15,000 in savings. I set up my first office in a converted garage I rented from an elderly couple in a suburban neighborhood. My desk was a door laid across 2 filing cabinets, my chair salvaged from a sidewalk. I ate even more ramen than during college, working 16-hour days to develop my security protocol into a marketable product. The first 3 months, I made exactly $0. The next 3, I made just enough from freelance coding to keep my electricity on. When my parents called, I kept conversations vague, letting them believe I was still employed at CloudStart, but working from home. Marcus, now starting his career in finance after a college football injury ended his professional prospects, would send texts like, "Hanging in there," and "Let me know if you need job leads," which I politely declined. 6 months into my entrepreneurial journey, I met Kevin Zhang at a local tech meetup where I was trying to network. He was a finance guy who understood tech and immediately grasped the potential of my security protocol. 2 weeks later, he became my first employee and eventual CFO, working for equity since I couldn't afford to pay him a salary. You realize what you've created could transform cloud security, right? Kevin asked during one of our late-night coding sessions. I hadn't allowed myself to think that big yet. Let's just get one client first, I replied. But his confidence was contagious. That first client came in month 8, a medium-sized insurance company willing to take a chance on our revolutionary approach to data security. The contract barely covered our minimal expenses, but it gave us something crucial, a case study, to show other potential clients. From the beginning, I made a strategic decision that would shape both my company and my personal life. I would remain anonymous as the founder. Shadowsphere LLC was established as the parent company, with trusted executives like Kevin serving as the public faces. I operated behind the scenes as a strategic consultant, attending meetings via proxy or phone, making decisions without publicity. This wasn't just about privacy. It was about focus. I had seen too many tech founders become celebrities, spending more time on magazine covers than developing products. I wanted no part of that distraction. Plus, if I was honest with myself, there was something satisfying about building something spectacular that my family couldn't take credit for or diminish. Our first year in business, we made just enough to pay Kevin and myself minimal salaries, living expenses, and not much more. Then came our breakthrough, a contract with Midland Financial, a mid-sized bank that needed cutting-edge security. Their CTO had heard about our protocol through industry channels and took a chance on us despite our size. That contract tripled our revenue overnight. Instead of upgrading my apartment or buying a new car, I reinvested every dollar into expansion, hiring 3 more developers and moving to a small but legitimate office space. I still drove my used Honda Civic and lived in the same studio apartment. 18 months after founding the company, we acquired our first competitor, a startup with complementary technology but cash flow problems. The acquisition doubled our client base and added key talent to our team. The tech press noted the move but couldn't figure out who was behind Shadowsphere. Speculation ranged from established tech giants testing new markets to foreign investors. No one suspected a 27-year-old working from a modest office in Seattle. Over the next 7 years, we grew through a series of strategic acquisitions and innovations. Our security protocols became industry standards, implemented by financial institutions, healthcare providers, and eventually government agencies. We expanded to offices in San Francisco, Austin, Boston, London, and Singapore, with over 2,000 employees worldwide. Through it all, I maintained my anonymity and modesty. I upgraded to a 2-bedroom condo, but refused the trappings of tech billionaire status. No mansion in the hills, no luxury car collection, no private island. My original Honda finally died after 11 years, replaced by a 3-year-old Toyota. My favorite restaurants were still hole in the wall, places where dinner cost under $20. Kevin, now managing billions in company revenue, would occasionally question my lifestyle choices. "You know you could buy a building instead of renting that condo, right?" he asked. After we closed a particularly lucrative quarter. "The condo serves its purpose," I replied. "Nobody needs 3 kitchens and an elevator in their home." The truth was, my modest lifestyle wasn't about money or even privacy, not entirely. It was about proving something to myself that I couldn't quite articulate, something about value existing independent of recognition. If my family had taught me anything, it was that external validation was fleeting and often misplaced. By my 34th birthday, Shadowsphere had become what industry insiders called the invisible giant in tech security. Our technology protected trillions in assets across the global financial system, secured medical records for hundreds of millions of patients, and safeguarded critical infrastructure. Few knew the company name outside tech circles, and almost nobody knew mine, which is exactly how I wanted it, until circumstances forced my hand in the most unexpected place possible, my brother's wedding. While I was building Shadowsphere in relative obscurity, Marcus was constructing his career with his usual flair for the dramatic. After his knee injury during junior year at Stanford destroyed his NFL prospects, he pivoted to what he called his backup plan with the same confidence he had once exhibited on the football field. "Finance is just another game with different rules," he told our parents over Christmas break that year. "And you know how good I am at games." True to his word, Marcus leveraged his Stanford connections to land an entry-level position at a prestigious firm in New York City. He started in their training program, quickly advancing through sheer force of personality and relentless networking. He moved firms twice in his first 3 years, each time securing a more impressive title and substantial salary increase, while I lived in my modest apartment driving a used car. Marcus embraced the finance lifestyle with gusto. His Instagram, which he made sure to show me whenever we spoke via video chat, showcased his designer suits, his luxury apartment in Manhattan, and the BMW he leased because image matters in this business. Dylan. Our family gatherings became showcases for Marcus's rising status. At Thanksgiving, he regaled everyone with stories about client meetings with minor celebrities and athletes. Just closed a deal with that actor from that superhero movie. You know the one, he would say casually, as if dropping million-dollar names was an everyday occurrence. When the conversation inevitably turned to me, I kept things intentionally vague. Work is going well. We're expanding into new security protocols, I would say, before deflecting with questions about Marcus's latest adventure. This pattern suited everyone. Marcus got the audience he craved. Our parents got to bask in his reflected glory, and I avoided lying while keeping my success private. Marcus assumed I was still a low-level programmer at some obscure tech company, struggling to find my path. This assumption wasn't corrected by anyone, least of all me. You know, I could introduce you to some people in the tech departments at my firm, Marcus offered during one Christmas dinner. 4 years after I had founded Shadowsphere. They're always looking for coders, and it would be a step up from where you are now. I smiled and thanked him for his concern. I'm pretty happy where I am, he laughed, clapping me on the shoulder. Always settling. That's your problem, bro. You need to think bigger. The irony nearly made me choke on my eggnog. Marcus met Sophia Reynolds at a charity gala in New York when he was 31. She was everything the adult Marcus valued. Beautiful, sophisticated, from a wealthy East Coast family with the right connections, and professionally successful in her own right, as a marketing executive for a luxury brand. Their courtship was documented extensively on social media. Weekend trips to the Hamptons, skiing in Aspen, dining at restaurants with month-long waiting lists. After 8 months of dating, Marcus proposed at sunset on a private yacht off the coast of Santorini. With a photographer hired to capture the moment for Instagram, the wedding planning began immediately and grew more elaborate by the week. 300 guests, a celebrity wedding planner, a historic estate venue booked 2 years in advance, and a budget that made our mother gasp when she heard the figure, though most of it was covered by Sophia's parents. $200,000, my mother whispered to me over the phone. Can you imagine spending that much on one day? I could, actually. That was roughly what Shadowsphere spent on daily operational costs at that point, but I kept that comparison to myself. As the wedding approached, family gatherings became increasingly uncomfortable for me. At Thanksgiving, Marcus made pointed comments about my starter apartment after seeing my place during a video chat. Still in that same place, huh? When are you going to upgrade to adult housing? At Christmas, he gifted me a book titled How to Get Promoted, Moving Up the Corporate Ladder, with a handwritten note saying, "Thought this might help you reach your potential. Love, Marcus." I thanked him politely while our parents exchanged concerned glances, clearly worried about their struggling younger son. The book joined others Marcus had given me over the years: Dressing for Success, Networking for Introverts, and Speaking with Confidence. All well-intended, all based on a fundamental misunderstanding of my life. In a twist of corporate fate, Shadowsphere began acquisition talks with Pinnacle Financial, the firm where Marcus had been working for the past 2 years. I discovered this during a routine review of potential acquisitions, seeing his name on the employee roster of their investment division. For a moment, I considered disclosing my identity to prevent any conflict of interest. Then I remembered Marcus introducing me at his engagement party as my kid brother who still plays with computers, and decided against it. Instead, I recused myself from direct negotiations while accelerating the acquisition timeline. By my calculations, the deal would close about a month after his wedding. The wedding invitation arrived in March, an elaborate affair of handmade paper and calligraphy that must have cost $20 per envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from Sophia. "Dylan, Marcus and I would love for you to be part of our special day. I know how much family means to Marcus, even though he sometimes has trouble showing it. Please come, Sophia." I almost declined, The thought of spending a weekend pretending to be less successful than I was, surrounded by people celebrating my brother's accomplishments, held little appeal. But something about Sophia's note suggested she saw more than Marcus did, and perhaps it was time to face my family dynamics directly. The pre-wedding dinner the night before the ceremony confirmed all my apprehensions. Marcus introduced me to his friends and colleagues as my brother, who works with computers, with the same tone someone might use to describe a perpetually unemployed relative. Later that evening, I overheard him telling a group of Stanford friends, "Dylan's still trying to find his way. Not everyone figures things out as quickly as we did, you know? But he's a good guy." I slipped away from the dinner early, returning to my hotel room to prepare myself for what would undoubtedly be an even more uncomfortable wedding day. What I couldn't have anticipated was that the next day would completely transform my relationship with my brother, our family, and perhaps most importantly, with myself. The Thornfield estate outside Boston looked like something from a fairy tale, all stone turrets and perfectly manicured gardens. I arrived in my rental car, a sensible sedan that looked woefully out of place among the luxury vehicles and chauffeured town cars lining the circular driveway. Inside, the historic building had been transformed into a wedding fantasyland, with crystal chandeliers, cascading flower arrangements in white and gold, and an army of staff in formal attire offering champagne to arriving guests. The wedding planner, a woman with a clipboard and an earpiece who moved with military precision, directed people to the ceremony space in the estate gardens. "Dylan Parker? Brother of the groom?" she confirmed, consulting her tablet. "You're in the second row on the right, family section." Before I could make my way to the gardens, I was intercepted by relatives eager to catch up before the ceremony. "Dylan, sweetie. How are you?" My Aunt Carol Ayer kissed my cheeks. "Are you still at that small company in Seattle? The computer one?" "Something like that," I replied with a practiced smile. "Uncle Robert joined us, drink already in hand. You know, my golf buddy Ronald is looking for an IT guy at his dental practice. Good benefits, steady work. I could put in a word if you're interested in a change." "Thanks, Uncle Robert. I'm pretty happy where I am." He patted my shoulder sympathetically. "Well, the offer stands. We all go through rough patches." The ceremony space was a masterpiece of wedding design, with rows of white chairs facing an elaborate floral arch where Marcus would soon say his vows. I took my assigned seat, noticing I was placed among cousins I barely knew rather than directly with my parents. A subtle reminder of the family hierarchy. My parents arrived moments later, my mother elegant in pale blue, my father looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. They hugged me briefly before taking their places in the front row, already distracted by greeting other relatives and Sophia's parents. The ceremony itself was surprisingly emotional. Marcus, standing tall at the altar in his custom tuxedo, actually teared up when Sophia appeared at the end of the aisle. His voice cracked during his vows, a display of vulnerability I hadn't seen from my brother since we were children. For a moment, I glimpsed the little boy who had once protected me from neighborhood bullies, before trophies and social status had come between us. As they exchanged rings and sealed their union with a kiss, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Genuine happiness for Marcus finding someone who clearly balanced him, sadness for our fractured relationship, and a quiet determination to finally address the elephant that had been following us since childhood. The cocktail hour that followed the ceremony was held in the estate's grand ballroom, where I immediately recognized several tech industry leaders among the guests. Sophia's father, it seemed, had connections that intersected with my world. I strategically positioned myself near the less crowded bar to avoid business associates who might expose my identity before I was ready. Sophia, radiant in her designer gown, made a point of finding me during the reception line. "Dylan, I'm so glad you came," she said, embracing me warmly. "Marcus talks about you all the time." "All good things, I hope," I replied, doubting that was true. "He admires you more than you know," she said with a knowing look that made me wonder exactly what she knew about me. Before I could probe further, she was whisked away to greet other guests. As the open bar worked its magic, Marcus became increasingly animated, moving from table to table, with a champagne flute permanently attached to his hand. I remained at my assigned table, seated with distant relatives and family friends, who seemed unsure why I was placed with them rather than at the family table. The reception formally began with an extravagant 5-course meal, served by white-gloved waiters. Between the soup and fish courses, the best man, Marcus's former Stanford roommate, delivered a speech filled with football anecdotes and stories of Marcus's legendary status on campus. To Marcus, who has never settled for second best in anything, the best man concluded, raising his glass. From quarterback to killing it on Wall Street, some guys just know how to win at life. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. My smile felt frozen on my face. After the main course, Marcus, now visibly tipsy, grabbed the microphone for an impromptu speech. This wasn't on the program. Judging by the wedding planner's alarmed expression, "I just want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate with Sophia and me," he began, his words slightly slurred. "Especially my amazing family who always supported my dreams." He turned toward our parents' table. "Mom and Dad, thank you for teaching me to reach for the stars and never settle for less than I deserve." Then to his new in-laws, to Sophia's parents, "I promise to give your daughter the luxury lifestyle she deserves. The house in Greenwich is just the beginning." The guests chuckled appreciatively. Then Marcus's gaze found me, and something shifted in his expression. And my brother Dylan, still working at that tiny firm in Seattle. He gestured toward me with his champagne glass, drawing every eye in the room to my table. "Maybe someday you'll move up to management. But hey, not everyone can be a success story." Awkward laughter rippled through the room. I felt my face burning but maintained my composure, raising my water glass slightly in acknowledgement. Inside, I was calculating the fastest route to the exit. 7 years of maintaining my privacy, of separating my identity from my company, all to avoid exactly this type of humiliation from the people who should support me most. As I contemplated making an early exit, I noticed a distinguished-looking man with silver hair at a nearby table staring at me with unmistakable recognition in his eyes. He whispered something to his companion, then stood and began making his way toward me. I recognized him immediately, though we had never met in person. Richard Blackwood, CEO of Pinnacle Financial. The company Shadowsphere was in the final stages of acquiring the company where my brother Marcus worked. The collision of my two worlds was about to happen in the most public way possible. Richard Blackwood approached my table with purpose, his expression a mix of surprise and deference that looked strange directed at someone who had just been publicly diminished. "Mr. Parker?" he said, extending his hand. "Sir, I didn't know you'd be here tonight. It's an honor to finally meet you in person." I shook his hand, acutely aware of the curious glances from others at my table. "Why not? I'm the groom's brother." Richard looked momentarily confused. "The groom? You mean Marcus Parker is your brother?" Before I could respond, Marcus appeared beside us, champagne still in hand, clearly drawn by the sight of his company's CEO talking to his underachieving brother. "Richard, I see you've met my brother," Marcus said, slipping into his networking mode despite his intoxication. "Dylan, Richard is the CEO of Pinnacle Financial, where I work in the investment division." "Yes, we were just establishing that connection," I said calmly. Richard looked between us, the puzzle pieces visibly connecting in his mind. "Marcus, you never mentioned you were related to Mr. Parker." Marcus's smile remained fixed, but confusion flashed in his eyes. "Of course I did. I'm a Parker. He's a Parker. Brothers. Like I just said, I meant Dylan Parker. Specifically," Richard clarified, turning to me with newfound respect. "Our parent company's owner." Marcus's face went through a fascinating transformation, confusion giving way to disbelief, then shock as the implications dawned on him. "Parent company? What are you talking about?" I took a slow sip of water, then smiled. "I own Shadowsphere. We acquired Pinnacle last month. The paperwork was finalized last week." The color drained from Marcus's face so rapidly, I was momentarily concerned he might faint. His mouth opened and closed without producing words, a rare sight for my perpetually confident brother. Richard, oblivious to the family drama unfolding, continued professionally. "The transition has been remarkably smooth. Your team's integration protocol is revolutionary. Truly." I was hoping to discuss the Asia-Pacific expansion during the upcoming board meeting. Of course, I replied, as if discussing billion-dollar business deals at weddings was perfectly normal. I think your Singapore team has some excellent insights on that market. We should bring them into the conversation. Marcus finally found his voice, though it emerged as a strangled whisper. You own Shadowsphere? The security company that's been all over the financial news? I nodded. For the past 10 years, yes, but that's a multi-billion-dollar company, Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. You told everyone you worked at a small tech firm. I never actually said that, I corrected gently. That's what you told everyone. I just never contradicted you. Our conversation was interrupted, as other business associates at the wedding recognized me and approached. Walter Chen, CEO of Next Gen Technologies, clasped my shoulder warmly. Dylan, I had no idea you'd be here. That last acquisition was brilliant. Absolute genius move. Rebecca Goldstein, a venture capitalist who had invested in one of our subsidiaries, joined the growing circle. The mysterious Mr. Parker in the flesh. I've been trying to get a meeting with you for 6 months. Whispers spread through the reception as the identity of the unassuming man in the unremarkable suit became clear. I could see my parents at their table, watching in bewilderment as their supposedly struggling son was suddenly the center of attention among the most influential guests. Sophia's father made his way to our group, extending his hand to me with a knowing smile. Mr. Parker, I was hoping we might meet today. Sophia mentioned her future brother-in-law was in tech, and I did my homework. Your reputation precedes you. Marcus's shock shifted towards something darker as he realized Sophia and her family had known about my success while he had remained ignorant. He tried to insert himself into the business conversations but was politely sidelined as topics moved to industry specifics beyond his knowledge. Throughout these exchanges, I maintained the calm professional demeanor that had become my trademark in business, while inside I processed the collapse of the careful separation I had maintained between my family life and professional identity. I caught Sophia watching the scene unfold with a thoughtful expression, her eyes moving between Marcus's increasingly agitated face and my composed one. There was compassion in her gaze, but also calculation, as if she was reassessing certain assumptions about the family she had just married into. The situation had escalated beyond my control. The very public exposure I had carefully avoided for years now, unfolding at my brother's wedding of all places. But as uncomfortable as it was, there was also a strange sense of relief, like a weight lifting after being carried for too long. The facade had cracked, and now it was time to deal with the aftermath. I could see Marcus seething, his wedding day spotlight completely eclipsed. And I knew a confrontation was inevitable. The only question was whether it would happen here in front of hundreds of guests, or somewhere more private. My answer came moments later when Marcus grabbed my elbow with unnecessary force and hissed in my ear, outside. Now, Marcus practically dragged me through the French doors onto a deserted stone terrace, away from the reception and curious eyes. The evening air was cool against my face, a stark contrast to the heat of Marcus's obvious fury. He paced back and forth, hands trembling slightly. Whether from anger or the champagne was hard to tell. What the hell was that? He demanded, voice vibrating with emotion. You humiliated me at my own wedding. I leaned against the stone balustrade, maintaining the calm I had cultivated through years of high-stakes business negotiations. I humiliated you? By existing? By being successful? Help me understand the problem, Marcus. The problem? He sputtered, running a hand through his carefully styled hair, disheveling it. The problem is you sitting there letting me make a complete fool of myself in front of everyone who matters to me, including my new wife and her family. And how exactly did I do that? I asked quietly. You know damn well how. Letting me think you were some struggling programmer all these years, when apparently you're some tech mogul. Why would you hide that? What kind of sick game are you playing? The question struck me as so ironic, I actually laughed, which only inflamed Marcus further. You think this is funny? Do you have any idea what this looks like? My own brother, and I knew nothing about his life. Nothing. Everyone in there thinks I'm either a liar or an idiot now. Marcus, I said, my voice level but firm. I've spent years, literal years, listening to you condescend to me about my career choices. Every family gathering, every phone call, every text message dripping with your assumption that I was somehow failing at life because I wasn't living it on your terms. I held up my hand as he tried to interrupt. No, you need to hear this. At my college graduation party, you told your friends I would be fixing printers forever while you conquered Wall Street. At Aunt Judith's funeral 3 years ago, you loudly discussed my career potential, as if I were a charity case in need of your guidance. Last Christmas, you gifted me career counseling. Marcus, in front of our entire extended family, I was trying to help you, he protested, but his eyes slid away from mine. You always seemed so content with mediocrity. I thought you needed motivation. Mediocrity? I repeated, the word tasting bitter. You defined success so narrowly, Marcus. The right address, the right car, the right clothes, the right connections. It never occurred to you that I might have different priorities, different values, different measures of achievement. So this was what? Revenge. Letting me ramble on like an idiot about your tiny company, waiting for the perfect moment to pull the rug out, planning your big reveal at my wedding? I shook my head. There was no plan. I kept my success private because I wanted to build something on my own terms, without the expectations and spotlight that have followed you since we were kids. Not everything is about you, Marcus. His anger escalated, turning to accusations that revealed deeper insecurities. You've always been jealous of me, always in the background, watching, judging. This whole secretive billionaire act is just your way of one-upping me, isn't it? You couldn't stand that I was happy, that I found success my way. Our increasingly heated exchange was interrupted by the soft click of the terrace door. Sophia stood there in her wedding gown, concern etched across her features as she took in the scene. I could hear you from inside, she said quietly, closing the door behind her. Marcus turned to her, gesturing wildly in my direction. Did you know about this? About who he really is? Sophia hesitated, then nodded. Yes. I've known for months. The betrayal on Marcus's face was palpable. How? Why didn't you tell me? I researched your family when we got engaged, Marcus. It's what I do before any major decision. You know that. She moved closer to him, her expression gentle, but firm. Shadowsphere isn't exactly obscure in financial circles. When I connected the dots and realized Dylan was the founder, I assumed you knew, but chose not to discuss it for whatever reason. Well, I didn't know. Marcus shouted, then immediately modulated his volume, aware of the reception continuing inside. My own fiancé knew my brother was a tech billionaire and didn't think that was worth mentioning. It wasn't my place to tell you about your own brother, Sophia replied calmly. I thought it was a family dynamic I didn't understand yet. Before Marcus could respond, the terrace door opened again, this time revealing our parents, their faces a mixture of confusion and concern. What's going on out here? My father demanded. People are starting to notice. You're both missing, Marcus. It's your wedding reception. My mother's eyes darted between us. Boys, whatever this is about, can't it wait until tomorrow? Ask your genius son here, Marcus said bitterly. Apparently he's been keeping some pretty significant secrets from the family. My father turned to me, bewilderment evident in his expression. Dylan? What's he talking about? I took a deep breath. The moment I had both dreaded and perhaps unconsciously wanted had finally arrived. I founded and own Shadowsphere, the technology security company. My mother's brow furrowed. The one that's always in the business section of the paper? That Shadowsphere? I nodded. But that company is worth, my father began, billions. Marcus finished for him. Apparently our Dylan here has been playing the struggling tech worker while secretly running an empire. And none of us knew. Not even his own family. The hurt in my mother's voice was worse than any anger could have been. Why would you keep something like that from us? Dylan? Did you think we wouldn't be proud of you? And there it was, the question that cut to the heart of everything. The weight of unspoken family dynamics hung in the air between us. Decades of subtle dismissals and unconscious favoritism crystallized in a single moment. Would you have been? I asked quietly. Really? because from where I stood, nothing I ever did seemed to matter as much as Marcus's achievements. My awards went in drawers while his trophies got special lighting. My competitions were optional. His games were mandatory family attendance. Even when I was doing well at MIT, the conversation always circled back to Marcus at Stanford. My voice cracked slightly. Years of suppressed emotion, finally finding release. I was invisible in this family for so long that it became easier to build my life where no one was watching, where my value wasn't constantly compared to his. That's not true, my father protested, but his eyes darted away, unable to hold my gaze. It is true, I insisted. Maybe not intentionally, maybe not maliciously, but it happened all the same. So I stopped looking for your approval and built something for myself. On my terms. Without the Parker name opening doors or the family spotlight creating expectations, Marcus, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, suddenly erupted. You let me make a fool of myself for years. What kind of brother does that? Every time I tried to help you, offered you connections, tried to motivate you, you were what? Laughing behind my back? The raw pain in his voice caught me off guard. Beneath the anger was genuine hurt. And for the first time, I considered how my secrecy might have appeared from his perspective. I wasn't laughing at you, Marcus. I just needed to forge my own path, separate from being defined as your brother. Can you understand that? Marcus turned away, hands gripping the stone balustrade so tightly his knuckles whitened. So you built an empire in secret. Congratulations. Was it worth sacrificing your relationship with your family? Sophia, who had been observing silently, placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. I think what Dylan is trying to say is that he felt the relationship was already sacrificed in some ways, by all of you. My parents looked stricken. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a cocktail napkin. We never meant to make you feel less important, Dylan. We were just so caught up in Marcus's activities, his needs. Because he demanded attention, I finished for her. And I didn't. So he got it. And I didn't. It's a simple equation. Really, that's not fair, Marcus protested, turning back to face us. You could have spoken up. You could have told us how you felt. Would it have made a difference? I asked. Or would it have just been poor, sensitive Dylan complaining again while golden boy Marcus continued collecting accolades? The harsh words hung in the air between us. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, then abruptly pushed past our parents and stormed back into the reception, the door slamming behind him. Sophia gave me an unreadable look. He needs time to process. This is a lot to take in, especially today, of all days. She followed her new husband inside, leaving me alone with our parents. My father looked older suddenly. Shoulders slumped under the weight of realizations too long in coming. We really messed up with you. Didn't we? It wasn't all bad, I conceded, some of my anger dissipating at the genuine remorse in his eyes. But yes, there were patterns that hurt. Deeply. My mother moved to embrace me, tears flowing freely now. I'm so sorry, Dylan. I had no idea you felt so invisible. And I'm so proud of what you've built. I just wish we could have celebrated your successes along the way. I should have been honest sooner, I admitted. Keeping my success secret started as self-protection, but eventually became a wall between us. That's on me. No, my father said firmly. It's on all of us. Family shouldn't make anyone feel like they have to hide their light. We failed you there, son. As we stood on that terrace, the sounds of celebration continuing inside, something shifted between us. The truth, finally spoken aloud after decades of silence, was painful but also freeing. Whether Marcus would eventually feel the same remained to be seen. We should go back inside, my mother said finally. It's still Marcus's wedding day. I nodded, knowing that while this conversation had cleared the air somewhat with my parents, the more difficult reconciliation with my brother lay ahead. Some wounds take longer to heal, especially those inflicted over a lifetime. The morning after the wedding, I was finishing breakfast in my hotel room when my phone vibrated with a text from Marcus. Coffee? Just us. The cafe across from your hotel. 10 a.m. I arrived early, choosing a quiet corner table, away from other patrons. Marcus entered precisely at 10, looking tired but composed. The previous day's anger replaced by something more contemplative. He sat across from me, hands wrapped around his coffee cup as if seeking warmth despite the mild spring day. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of yesterday's revelations hanging between us. "I owe you an apology," Marcus finally said, the words clearly difficult for him. "Not just for yesterday, but for years of treating you like you were somehow less than me. I never meant to, but intentions don't change impact." The humility in his voice was so unlike the brother I knew that I found myself momentarily speechless. "I'm sorry too," I replied eventually. Keeping my success secret started as self-protection, but eventually became a form of deception. "You deserved better from your brother," Marcus nodded slowly. "Can I ask why? Really why? Beyond what you said yesterday, about feeling invisible." I considered the question carefully. "Have you ever felt like you were cast in a role in our family that you couldn't escape? The golden boy, the athlete, the charmer. That was you. The quiet one, the computer kid. The afterthought. That was me. After a while, I stopped trying to change the narrative and just built my own. Separate from all of you. I always knew you were smarter than me," Marcus admitted quietly. "From when we were kids, I could throw a football, but you could build things, understand things that seemed like magic to me. I guess I needed to be better at something, to have my own space where I shined. You were better at almost everything that seemed to matter to Mom and Dad," I pointed out. "Things that were visible, measurable in trophies and newspaper clippings," he countered. "But I knew. I always knew you would outpace me eventually. I just didn't expect to find out during my wedding toast." Despite everything, we both laughed. A brief release of tension that felt like the first genuine moment between us in years. "I should have told you," I acknowledged. "Before the acquisition, at least. That was a conflict of interest I handled poorly." "Why did you decide to acquire Pinnacle anyway? Was it because I worked there?" I shook my head. "Complete coincidence. I recused myself from direct negotiations when I saw your name on the employee roster. But the acquisition made strategic sense. I would have delayed the announcement until after your honeymoon if Richard hadn't recognized me." Marcus took a sip of his coffee, his expression thoughtful. "Sophia said she figured out who you were months ago. When I asked her why she didn't tell me, she said some things need to be addressed directly between brothers. She's smarter than both of us, I think. I like her," I said sincerely. "She seems to balance you in all the right ways." "She does." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "She spent half the night explaining to me how my competitive nature and need for validation probably pushed you further into your shell. Brutal honesty. That one. Sounds like a keeper." "Yeah." Marcus met my eyes directly. "So where do we go from here, Dylan? Can we start over somehow?" I considered the question. "Not over, I think, but forward. Differently. With honesty and without the old roles. We've both been playing for too long." "I'd like that," he said simply. We talked for 3 hours that morning, having the conversation we should have had years ago. Marcus confessed his longtime insecurity about my intelligence and how it had driven his need to succeed in more visible ways. I admitted how much I had actually admired his social confidence and ability to command a room. "I always knew you were smarter," he said. "I just needed to be better at something, and I always wished I could work a room the way you do," I countered. We each had what the other wanted. In some ways, we parted with an awkward hug that turned genuine, the first step in what we both recognized would be a long process of rebuilding. The months that followed brought cautious but steady reconciliation. Marcus and Sophia delayed their honeymoon by a week so the 4 of us, along with our parents, could have several family dinners to begin healing old wounds. The weekly calls between Marcus and me became a new tradition, initially awkward but gradually more natural. For the first time, he showed genuine interest in my work, asking thoughtful questions about Shadowsphere's technology and business strategy. In turn, I attended several of his company events, no longer hiding my identity or success. Thanksgiving that year featured a dramatically different family dynamic. My parents made visible efforts to acknowledge both sons equally, asking about our respective work with the same level of engagement and interest. Tell us more about that new security protocol your team is developing. Dylan, my father said during dinner, genuinely attentive in a way that would have seemed foreign just a year earlier. Christmas gifts that year were thoughtful rather than symbolic, with no books on career advancement in sight. Marcus gave me a framed photo of us as children, arms around each other's shoulders, taken before trophies and expectations had come between us. In February, Marcus and Sophia visited Seattle, and I gave them a tour of Shadowsphere's headquarters. Watching Marcus take in the scale of what I had built, there was no resentment in his eyes, only genuine appreciation. "This is incredible, Dylan," he said, gesturing to the sprawling campus. "You created all this from nothing. I don't think I ever gave you enough credit for how brilliant you really are." By spring, our relationship had evolved enough that when Marcus mentioned wanting to leave Pinnacle to start his own boutique financial firm, I offered both advice and potential investment, with no strings attached. "I want to build something that's mine," he explained. "Something with my name on it that I created. Not just another position at someone else's company." "I understand that better than anyone," I told him. "And I'll help however I can, as long as you promise to do it your way, not what you think is expected." That summer, we took a family vacation together for the first time in over a decade. A week at a lakeside cabin where we fished, hiked, and spent evenings talking on the deck under the stars. No laptops, no business calls, just reconnection. One night, as our parents had gone to bed and Marcus and Sophia were taking a moonlit walk, I sat alone on the dock, reflecting on how much had changed in a single year. The liberation I felt wasn't about the reveal of my success or the validation from my family, but from finally being free of the need for that validation at all. The moment I stopped needing my brother's approval was when I finally felt truly successful. The billions, the company, the acquisitions, none of that had filled the hollow space that childhood insecurities had carved within me. Only honesty, vulnerability, and genuine connection could do that. Marcus joined me on the dock, handing me a beer as he sat down beside me. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. "Just reflecting on what success really means," I replied. "It's not what I thought it was for most of my life." He nodded. "I spent years chasing the external markers, thinking each promotion, each status symbol would finally make me feel like I'd arrived. But it was never enough. And now?" He looked out over the moonlit lake. "Now I'm learning that success might be simpler than all that. Building something meaningful. Loving someone who sees you clearly. Having a brother who knows all your flaws and sticks around anyway." We clinked our bottles together in silent agreement. Two brothers who had finally found their way back to each other after a lifetime of misunderstanding. Sometimes the people who knew you first are the last to see who you've become. But when they finally do, when the masks fall away and honest recognition replaces old assumptions, that's when true healing begins. Has anyone in your family ever underestimated your potential or pigeonholed you into a role you outgrew? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Remember that sometimes the greatest success isn't what you build in the world, but the honest relationships you create along the way. Thank you for listening to my story today.